In this episode of the TWR Roadmap, I want to get deeper into the subject of desire. We're going to start touching on the components of desire and, more importantly, what creates desire? Why is it critical to both platonic and romantic relationships? In fact, in getting this conversation started, I actually have a few questions for you. So let's get into it. I'm going to first do the intro. Welcome to 12-Week Relationships. This is your place for better relationships in weeks, not years. My name is Pye. Now, if you're not familiar to the podcast and platform, this is a roadmap episode, meaning it's an accompanying episode to our newsletter. You can find the newsletter at 12weekrelationships.com, and Dr. Glenn and I promise that this newsletter, well, these are handwritten messages. When we send them out, it's going to be stuff that's valuable, insights, information that you can bring into your daily life. We promise not to spam or send any junk. So given that it's a roadmap episode, it's just me today. Dr. Glenn is in session. We're giving him a break. All right, let's get right into what creates desire. And like I said, I had a few questions. I'm going to carry forward the last conversation where we talked about all the different people that you're going to meet in your life. You know, some estimates put that number at you're going to meet 10,000 people. Some estimates go up to 100,000 people when they incorporate social media and technology and the ability to travel. Okay, regardless of specifics, first question, why do most of your acquaintances never turn into friendships? Think about that for a second. Along the same lines, I have another question. Why do most of your friendships tend to fade over time? All right, now when hearing that, you might want to kind of push back. Oh no, I'm still friends with everybody. That's not necessarily what I mean, and I would probably argue that. But what I'm really saying is that, you know, of all the friendships that you create, there's only a certain number that you end up being close to long term. Okay. So ultimately what we're getting at is what creates desire and why is it so fleeting? This interesting thing, desire is one of the most studied topics in relationships. And what's fascinating to me about it is that we're usually using the term romantically. We're describing sexual desire. And you can see this because, I mean, every time I'm at a grocery stand, I'm not in New York, so it's a grocery store here in California, but every time I'm checking out and you have all the magazines, right? You look at all the different, romantic magazines. This is where you'll quickly find out that I don't necessarily read a lot of these because I'm calling them romantic magazines. I mean like Cosmo and Vogue and all the magazines that would cover the topic of romance, right? You'll typically see things like, and they're usually written towards women. So it's how to light him on fire, how to maintain that desire, 10 things you can do to drive him crazy. Like everything around the subject of desire is essentially sexual. And because of that, we tend to think of desire as just this thing that is attached to our romantic relationships. When in reality, desire is not just sexual, it's the want for a relationship, and it is equally as applicable to a romantic relationship as a platonic relationship, to a friendship, to a family relationship, whatever it might be. On top of that, it's not only important at the beginning of your relationship, but it's also critical that you maintain desire throughout a relationship. Okay, so we can easily just say that desire looks a little bit different when it comes to sexual desire versus non-sexual desire. But ultimately, we're talking about the same thing. It's a want for a relationship. And when you notice within CVFT, within core value focused therapy, this is our trademarked approach to therapy, right? Whenever you see us write about desire, you're often going to see us capitalizing it within CVFT or within the stupid simple relationship method. These are, again, the two acronyms. The SSRM was the roadmap, and over the top of it, we built CVFT, or the actual therapy model. So when you see desire capitalized, it's because we're using it as a proper noun. It's describing the first component of the stupid simple relationship method. And if you see the diagram again, or if I remind you, if you're not watching the video, on video, we will show these diagrams as we discuss. But if you're just listening, the stupid simple relationship method from that high level view had 3 pieces. And you can remind yourself it looks like a recycle circle, right? With those arrows that point to each other in this circle. And the first arrow was desire. The second arrow and piece was, well, desire points to quality time. And then quality time points to sustainability, which then points back to desire. So desire is that first piece of this framework. And within it are 5 components. So this is why we capitalize desire when we speak of it from this framework, because desire is housing 5 components inside. We call those 5 components the 5 R's of desire. And yes, once again, going back to this is supposed to be stupid simple, right? The stupid simple relationship method. As I was designing this and I was coming up with these components and all the data was starting to fall into place, I was like, I need to make this so easy that we can just make it the 5 R's of desire. And so on the flip side, there's actually the 5 C's of sustainability as well. But given that, it's just easier to remember. So the first is regard, and then reward, reciprocation, relatability, and risk. I'm going to go through all of these with time. It's not important right now that you remember each of these different components. But for right now, when we had earlier kind of defined desire as your perceived benefits of a relationship, meaning you need to have these benefits there. And that can sound kind of odd, right? If you're thinking benefits from like a work standpoint, you're talking about like work perks, compensation, that kind of stuff. It's not financial benefits. We're talking about mostly emotional benefits. But these 5 R's would describe those perceived benefits that you might have. And it's important that we kind of stop to recognize that our relationships, well, they do need to have benefits to them. Otherwise, if there's no reason to create them, if there's no benefit of some sort, it doesn't have to be financial in nature, but we have to recognize the fact that there's no point in investing energy into something that has no return. And I know that's maybe a cold or calculated way of thinking of it. I'm not asking you to think this way. Nobody naturally thinks this way when they're creating relationships. Or at least, I hope that you don't think this way when you create relationships. It's more so an understanding that, okay, relationships are going to come with costs and they should also come with benefits. That's just a simple reality that we need to understand. So looking at the 5 R's, if I'm to briefly describe each one, regard is kind of, well, this is your respect, your admiration, your attraction to a person. It's the first piece of desire. If regard is broken, the whole thing falls apart. So that's why it's kind of at the top. So regard is the most critical part of maintaining desire. It's how you look upon a person. And to maintain desire, you need to have a high sense of regard for somebody, whether it's, again, friendship or platonic. Okay, next we have reward. Reward is, again, not designed to sound financial. It's just simply any type of emotional reward that's kind of outside of just these other natural things that come within the relationship. For you, it might be their ability to make you laugh, or maybe it's to make you just have a good time and to forget, your woes. Or it could be someone that you feel comfortable and safe with. It could be a whole bunch of different things when it comes to reward. Then we have reciprocation. This is a core human need. We need to feel like the other person actually wants the relationship with us. And when that person reciprocates, it boosts our desire for the relationship. Then we have relatability. Again, another core human need for us to be understood, for us to be able to relate to one another's experiences. Again, this boosts desire. And then we have the last piece, risk. This is a fun one. Risk describes the possibility of an unknown outcome. It's the chance that things might not go the way that you expect, or maybe the way that you want them to. And you'd go, well, why is that important in relationships? Well, if you think of risk, it's really the critical piece of everything, anything meaningful in life. It is meaningful because of the fact that it can go the other way, right? give you an example. Why is it so meaningful to get into a prestigious university? Because the majority of applicants don't. Why is it so exciting to race a car on a track? Because there's a danger. And what happens if you actually crash? In fact, if you were to take away that risk of crashing the car and just to race a car in a simulator, immediately that excitement, that adventure, it's lost. So risk is that piece of an unknown possibility, right? Why is it so important to your relationships? Because this unknown, this constant changing and growing, it's exactly what brings excitement and adventure to your relationships. Guess what? At the beginning of a new relationship, the risk is abundant. You don't know the other person, whether it's a friendship or a romance. You don't know the other person. All of it is new. You don't know whether it's going to last. You don't know. It's just this thing that's ready and waiting to be explored. Now, you mix sexual intimacy into a romantic relationship, and that risk, it gets amplified multiple times. So this is the piece that comes with every new relationship. And usually it's the risk of a new relationship, whether it's friendship or romance. It's that risk that pushes our desire at the beginning because it's so abundant. And what ends up happening over time? We fall into patterns, into routine, and we rob the relationship of risk. We sometimes do it intentionally because the opposite of risk is safety. See, we crave this adventure, right? And this is the weird part about this. We crave adventure and excitement on one side, but then instinctually we're programmed to seek comfort and security. So we unwittingly often will create routine in our relationship to make us feel secure, to make us feel comfortable, and we end up reducing or even removing risk. And this is where things can kind of get boring, where it gets stale. So when we talk about the excitement, the passion in a romance, we're talking risk. When we're talking about the adventure, the growth in a friendship, we're talking risk. It's one and the same. They're just different avenues of kind of expressing it in these different types of relationships. So those are the 5 R's of desire. And once again, I don't need you guys to memorize all this stuff right now. This isn't a test. We're going to be talking about each of these components in depth throughout this podcast and throughout individual roadmap episodes. For right now, these 5 R's, they represent the emotional benefits of you creating or maintaining a new relationship, okay? These are what supports your decision to invest your time, your energy in either making that new thing or just keeping this existing relationship going. So when you feel desire waning, those are the places to look. Thing is, when it comes to core value focused therapy, we actually never coach within desire. Meaning, like, if someone comes to us and they say, and usually when we talk, like when people come to us and are actually paying Dr. Glenn to coach, it's going to be generally about a romantic relationship. Nobody pays for coaching for friendships, right? So usually we'll see a couple and they'll say things like, I just don't feel like I want the relationship anymore. I don't even know if I trust this person. Well, we find that there's like some deep-seated wounds and things that have happened, right, that have damaged the regard for the relationship. That's the first thing that we have to repair, but we can't do it from desire. Meaning, like, we're not going to sit there and just say, oh, well, you have to trust each other. You have to do this because if you can't fix regard, then it's not going to work. All of our work exists on the opposite side, in sustainability. See, when desire breaks down, it's not because of desire. It's because the emotional cost, the things that are happening within sustainability have cost the relationship so much that they're damaging desire. So we're not working in desire, we're working in sustainability. Same thing with any of the other pieces, reward, reciprocation, relatability. What you'll find is that on the opposite side in sustainability, each of these link up to the components that are within sustainability. And when something goes wrong on that side, it damages a piece of desire. So this is how they're all interrelated. And I'm hoping that at this point, maybe you're seeing a little bit of the, 500 plus case studies, all the data science that went into this. It'll make more and more sense, but these are all interrelated components. But the work is on the sustainability side. Now I want to go back to our last conversation. In that last conversation, and if it wasn't the last episode, it was the conversation that we talked about Dunbar's number. So just to quickly reiterate, Robin Dunbar, a British anthropologist, in 1990 released his theory, his studies that talked about, based on human brain size, based on cognitive limitations, we're going to be limited to around 5 to 15 close to best type of relationships, intimate relationships. And in terms of total relationships, we're limited to around 150 friendships or so. These are averages. Please, there's been plenty of people that have challenged his numbers. What I want you guys to take from this is that each of you are limited in terms of the number of intimate relationships you can create and maintain, as well as the number of total friendships you have. And this says something because we also talked about the fact that some studies show that you're going to meet 10,000 people, others up to 100,000 plus people. So who knows what that number is, and it really doesn't matter. Ultimately, what it's all saying is that of all the people that you meet, 0.1% will become friendships, 0.01%, and again, these are just numbers, right? It could be 0.1 to 0.01% become friendships. 0.01 to 0.001 become these significant, intimate relationships. So who you choose matters. Who you put in your inner circle matters, because each new person can only take time from an existing relationship. That was our last conversation. That was that conversation about Dunbar's number. The question now, why do you choose to invest time in certain relationships? This is where we go back to desire. See, when you meet somebody, the vast majority, the 99% of people that you're going to meet, the acquaintances, all these different people, you're going to meet them, you're going to exchange pleasantries, and you really probably won't talk to them again. Or maybe you do talk to them now and then on Facebook. Maybe they reach out. Maybe you comment on each other's posts, or, and I'll say social media because Facebook very much dates, me. I don't know, but you don't really have conversations on Instagram. It's not the place to go and type in the comments. It's very difficult. So for right now, maybe you chat on social media. But there's nothing more. You're not pursuing anything more. Maybe they pursue something more. Maybe they don't. But either way, for this vast majority of people that you're going to meet, you're not pursuing anything deeper. Why? Because the desire doesn't exist. It's not there for you. And it's important to understand that. It's important to understand why that is. It starts with the fact that there's maybe not a overarching sense of, regard for them. It doesn't mean that you have contempt for them. The opposite of regard would be contempt. It doesn't mean that you don't respect them as people. You don't, love them as brothers and sisters or any of that kind of stuff. What it means is there's not necessarily that, if we're talking romantically, that attraction, that respect, the admiration. And if we're talking platonically, it's, again, there can be a platonic attraction as well. But that platonic attraction or that respect, that admiration, it's not there. Maybe you don't perceive reward in the relationship. Maybe there's not really a lot of relatability. When I say that, I mean you're not perceiving it, right? And because it's not really reciprocated on either side, there's nothing here to kickstart desire. I want you to think about this in context, okay? I want you to imagine yourself. Think of the car that you drive. I don't know what that is. If you struggle with this, or maybe if this will be perfect, because I'm going to give you my example, right? I drive an SUV. Currently driving a dad SUV. It's an Acura, and I'm waiting for my Model X to arrive, which I'm completely stoked about, and it's been on back order for, a year. So I'm still waiting on my Model X. But when it comes, I will be pulling up to whatever place it might be. And this is a terrible analogy because I just said, I was going to say a gas station, but now I have my Model X, so that doesn't quite work out. So I'm in my Acura. I pull up to a gas station. I want you to imagine you in your car pulling up to this gas station. And in front of you, a person on a bike, let's say it's a Harley Davidson, shows up. And, imagine that they are whatever sex that you would be. I guess what I'm trying to say is that imagine that they are the sex that you are platonically interested in. So for me, I would be, okay, it would be a guy that's showing up. I'm interested in friendships with guys, not romantic relationships. So think of that. This person pulls up on a Harley Davidson and I'm in my Acura and I've got my, 4 kids in the car, and that person is in leather chaps and dressed to the nines in their Harley Davidson attire, revving the engine. What is the likelihood that you think I would walk up to the person and start a conversation to create a friendship? See, maybe for some of you, you thought of pulling your bike up to the gas station. And when I described a Harley Davidson, pulling up and the person on it, you might have had the instinctual kind of interest of going, oh yeah, I want to go talk to them and see what kind of bike they have. But I would guess, just based on the number of cars on the road, that the vast majority of you probably wouldn't go start that conversation. Because, and if we go back to my situation, what we're talking about is this snap judgment that we're making, this perception that me with my 4 kids and my, essentially minivan of SUVs, I don't really have much in common with that person, at least from this snap judgment perspective. I might be wrong in that. We could be totally wrong in our snap judgments, right? But what we're perceiving is that there's not really going to be, and again, we're not thinking of this consciously. It's a subconscious thought process as I go through and I kind of think, well, this isn't someone who I aspire to be. I don't really see much reward or benefit in starting that conversation. I don't think we can really understand each other. So both of us just go about our day, both the bike rider and myself. We don't strike up a conversation. And that's probably what it's going to be for the majority of you. See, this is why the majority of us, when it comes to acquaintances, and it's not necessarily as extreme as this example, but for the majority of us, the desire isn't there because we're not perceiving a benefit of, putting our time and energy into making the introduction and kind of continuing forward and doing all that kind of stuff. I feel like that is very critical to understand. And by the way, if we were to look at this in terms of the stupid simple relationship method, the diagram, well, on the video, what you're seeing is the 3 arrows are essentially blank. A relationship never forms because desire is missing. And because desire is missing, we never go to quality time. And because we don't ever spend time together, there's no sustainability. It's not a factor. So the reason that most acquaintances never turn into anything more is because there is no underlying desire for anything more. And it's a mutual thing. It's a both people don't have that need for it. This is the interesting part, though, is that we can be completely wrong in those snap judgments. We'll talk about those later. We'll talk about our ability to be able to, make snap judgments better. But those judgments are actually important. You might be thinking like, why be so judgmental? Why do this? That's important. From a heuristic standpoint, it's important just for your own ability to survive, to be able to understand where to put your energy, where to put your time. It's important to make good snap judgments. But what's also critical is that they're good snap judgments, right? That we're not making the wrong judgments. And judgments don't have to be things like, oh, they're a bad person. It has nothing to do with the quality of an individual or their worth. It simply has to do with, do I want to place my time there, or do I think it's a valid place to put my time? Why? Because again, we go back to that number, that thought, Dunbar's number, that if I'm limited to 5, 10, 20 of these close relationships, and I know that my family, my immediate family already takes up 12, 14, 15 of those, then I have to be selective about where I'm putting my time. So your snap judgments are important, but it's important that you get them right. And it's important that in a snap judgment, you're not judging a character or the quality of an individual or their worth or any of those things. You're simply making an assessment of where you should be putting your time. Okay, let's go then to, we understand that the vast majority, the 99% or the 99.9% who never become friendships, it's because the desire just isn't there, right? Let's go to the 1% or the 0.01% or the 0.1, whatever number it is, the small number of people that actually make it to become friendships, right? We went on to say that the majority of these still don't last? Well, it's because these relationships lack sustainability. They start with desire, but they lack sustainability. Again, as a reminder, think of sustainability. We'll get into the 5 C's of sustainability, and we'll talk more about that later. For now, just understand that where desire houses your perceived emotional benefits, sustainability are the actual emotional costs. Your actual emotional cost, your perceived emotional cost, whatever it might be, because your costs are going to be different than mine, right? Just based on our personalities, some relationships will be easy for me to maintain, but probably difficult for you to maintain, and vice versa. You might find some relationships easy for you, but they would be difficult for me. But sustainability are the emotional costs. When we say that a relationship lacks sustainability, we're saying that the emotional costs, well, they consistently outweigh the benefits. Again, I know that this can sound calculated. I mean, it's intended to be formulaic so that we can understand it, so that we can break it down in a way that's simple to be able to discuss, right? But maybe you're thinking that it sounds cold. It's not intended to be that. I want you to understand this simple truth. You can't maintain a relationship that lacks sustainability long term, okay? When I say this, when we say lack sustainability, we're speaking long term, because every relationship goes through its own woes, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a family member, whether it's a romance. Every relationship has periods of times, these storms, where the cost is high and the benefits are low. That's normal. And those storms can last a while. They could be a week, they could be a day, they could be a month, they could be a year, whatever it might be, right? What we're saying, though, when something lacks sustainability is that long term, it is, well, the costs outweigh the benefits. Now, to put this in perspective for you so that you understand that this isn't being judgmental, what we're saying is that if a relationship lacks benefits, if that the costs of that relationship are more than the benefits long term, the only way for you to maintain that relationship is for you to sacrifice yourself in doing so. It's either going to come at the cost of you or at the cost of both people in the relationship, but that's the only way that it can be maintained. It's going to lead to resentment, and in most cases, an eventual breakdown, or just a continual buildup of resentment if you choose just to stay in it for whatever reason. It's the same thought here that, well, if you're getting on an airplane, put your own mask on before helping your children. They say that. They literally say, before you help your children, put your own mask on first. Why? You're no good to them if you're dead. You really can't help anyone if you're unconscious. It's the same thought that, well, a farmer would not be successful at farming if he or she were to eat more food than they were producing, right? You can't do that. In fact, you had to be sustainable as a farmer, you would have to produce more food to create enough revenue that was far above the cost of farming, which is significant with all the tools and all the materials and labor and everything. It's the exact same reason why businesses can't be successful by indefinitely operating at a loss. But also, we can understand from that perspective that a business or a farmer, they might have a bad year. They might have periods of downturns. They might have certain times where they do operate at a loss, right? But they have to recover from it. Your relationships are no different. And when we look at a relationship that lacks sustainability from the standpoint of the SSRM, the Stupid Simple Relationship Method, what you see in the diagram is we start with desire, that first arrow. We go and we create time together. And for a time, that works because the risk, the fun, the excitement of a new relationship keeps it going. But as that relationship is no longer new anymore, and as the arguments and the conflict and all the different things start to pile up and the difficulty in relating to each other and just being able to have a conversation, what you see is that we're missing sustainability. And because of that, we can't feed desire. In fact, when you lack sustainability, your desire slowly fades along with it. Well, it can slowly fade. It can also quickly fade, just depending on the magnitude, the severity of whatever might have happened within the relationship. Sometimes it's just this slow buildup. Other times there's one specific event that kills it. But in either case, we're not feeding desire. So at some point, the relationship ends. This happens a lot. You create a new friendship, everything is fun. It's adventurous, it's exciting. You both are growing, you're learning new things, you're taking on each other's interests. But, a couple months into it, you start expressing certain things like, hey, when you do this, it kind of bugs me. And then they start sharing opinions that you really disagree with. And when you discuss them, you can't have a conversation about it. And you begin to realize that, our viewpoints and the way that we approach life is fundamentally different. And for most friendships, there's no explosive ending. It's just over time, as you begin to understand that it's not what you thought it was, you slowly lose desire. You slowly stop texting as much, stop calling as much. And they move their way over to maybe not so much a close friend. They're not in the inner circle anymore. They move their way more to the friendship circle. And then with time, maybe they kind of edge their way more back to the acquaintance circle. This is going to be a regular thing for you, for everybody. This is the norm. Sometimes friendships can end with something explosive, but usually that's not the case. And when it comes to romantic relationships, the exact same thing is happening. But the only difference here, I want you to think of this. Platonically, when we look at a relationship, and this is what I was seeing early on when I was designing out the SSRM, I wasn't seeing relationships as something completely different, whether it was friendship, whether it was family, whether it was romantic, right? But what I began to notice was that friendships tended to flame out a lot quicker. When sustainability isn't present in a friendship, it ends a lot faster than in a romantic relationship. And I thought, why? Well, as I began to do those studies and put the data together, it was kind of obvious. In a new romantic relationship, and there's a lot of pieces to this, but I'm going to simplify it down to this. Sex is fun. Intimacy is fun. Being physically close and sharing that piece with someone else, that in and of itself is reward. That in and of itself is enough to fuel desire, especially at the beginning of a new relationship. And it doesn't even have to be sex. It can be just making out. Some sort of physical intimacy, touch, connection. We crave it. We have this need for connection. And yes, friendships fill part of that need, but not the physical, not the touch piece, not the actual physical intimacy piece of that need. So we have this core human need, and that new romantic relationship is filling it. And so risk is boosted by this physical intimacy, this excitement, this adventure, but so is reward. And it takes time for that to wane. More time than in a friendship, because in a friendship, you don't have that piece of reward. So in a friendship, we're actually looking at it more clearly. We're looking at it from, this set of glasses that isn't fogged over with this kind of sexual attraction, this romantic desire, and all that kind of stuff. So those flame out quicker. But on the romantic side, that sex, the physical intimacy, the touch, the kisses, the making out, all of that, this new closeness to somebody, the feeling of love, that in and of itself is a reward. It's an intoxicating reward, and it's very much tied to the neurochemicals in your brain. So much so that love, that physical intimacy in a new relationship, studies show that it's actually more similar to cocaine, to a drug addiction, than it is anything else. And yes, friendship has something similar, but it's far less intense. So that can cloud the vision for quite a while. A lot of studies show that it could be 6 months, up to 2 years, until you get past it, until the intimacy piece is no longer a functioning, it's not the only thing that's fueling the reward, the risk. It's not the only aspect that's fueling desire. When you get past that place, when you're over it, then we begin to see the romance clearly. we begin to look for the other pieces of the relationship. Some of us are quicker about getting there than others. But that's the difference. And the crazy part about this, so many couples will marry. They will choose to make substantial, significant life decisions when they're in that mix. Maybe it's not marriage. Maybe it's moving in together. For some, it could be starting a business together. For some, it could be actually going and getting married, right? But it's that decision that then increases this cost, this thought of, well, what happens if it ends? So why do we spend so much time trying to analyze, trying to fix something within marriage, within romantic relationships? Well, it's because oftentimes the early rush, the early excitement pushes us to make major life decisions, and to undo those decisions, the costs are high. So we work at it. We try to figure it out. In many cases, we can. We can create a healthy relationship. In many cases, we cannot, because fundamentally, the relationship was unhealthy to begin with, but it was being fueled by that rush, that desire. But that doesn't mean that friendship and romance are different. It just means that these things are intensified. It's the same underlying framework, the same principles. But on the friendship side, we take it down to a less intense degree. And on the romantic side, we dial it up to basically the most intense degree. Because when it comes to marriage, when it comes to romantic relationships, well, our level of expectation has been ratcheted up so high by society and the culture around us that this is the ultimate, the pinnacle of relationships. So yeah, the intensity on that side is super high. But underneath it is the exact same structure. All right. So that's it for our conversation today. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, I'd love for you to subscribe to the newsletter. You can find it at 12weekrelationships.com. And as I said earlier, we promise, just like our podcast, like everything that we do, what we deliver to you, it's going to be handwritten, it's going to be personal, insightful, and it's not going to waste your time. Second, if y'all want to help us out, not only would we love for you to subscribe to the podcast, but we'd love for you to leave us a review. You can jump into the iTunes store, leave a review for the podcast, and along with your 5-star review, please make it a 5-star. Leave a description. Dr. Glenn and I, we love reading all the reviews and the people that are commenting. We read every single one of them. And if you have any critique, anything less than 5 stars, well, DM us. You can message us directly on Instagram, and you can also find us on TikTok. Not only can you message us on these platforms, well, I believe Instagram you can message us on. TikTok doesn't really work that way. But on both these platforms, you're also going to find our shorts. These are bite-sized videos and ideas that are not only designed to be kind of insightful and interesting, helpful to you, but also shareable. So if you want to share them with your friends, feel free to do so. In the meantime, if any of you want one-on-one coaching, you can jump onto the wait list at 12weekrelationships.com. And also when online coaching is available, we'll be sure to let you know as well. That's it for me. See you guys next time. Peace.